Since the inception of the first universities, academic freedom has served as a core value for professors, for students, and for institutions of higher education. Academic freedom has two components, an individual component and an institutional component. First, academic freedom refers to the freedom of the individual professor to pursue research and teaching without control or censorship. Or, as Albert Einstein once said, by academic freedom, I understand the right to search for truth and to publish and teach what one holds to be true. Second, academic freedom also refers to the right of a university to determine its educational mission free from external intervention from governments, corporations, and other external actors. In short, universities should enjoy institutional autonomy. Academic freedom depends on a plural, democratic society. And as a component of fostering democracy, academic freedom is often one of the first targets of authoritarian policies. The close link between authoritarian policy and academic freedom is evident in the contemporary drift towards authoritarianism. In Brazil, the newly elected right-wing president Jair Bolsonaro proposed eliminating programs in sociology and philosophy. In Poland, the government have intervened against courses in gender studies, and in Hungary, the renowned Central European University is forced out of the country. However, assaults on academic freedom are particularly severe and wide-ranging in Turkey. The attacks on academic freedom in Turkey can be summarized as two successive waves. In January 2016, more than 1,000 Turkish scholars signed a petition with the title "We will not be party to this crime," the so-called peace petition. The petition demanded that the Turkish state abandon its violence against the Kurds in southeastern Turkey and that the government prepare the conditions for peace talks. The peace petition was met with harsh political response. The Turkish President Erdogan accused the signatories of disloyalty and of spreading terrorist propaganda. As a result, the Turkish public prosecutor, as well as the Higher Education Board, took legal action against the signatories, resulting in imprisonments, dismissals, and travel restrictions. The failed military coup of July 15 of the same year became a catalyst for another and much broader attack on academic freedom. According to President Erdogan and the Turkish government, the attempted coup was the work of generals who were followers of Fethullah Gülen, a Muslim cleric living in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania in the United States. Under successively renewed state of emergency laws, arrests and significant purges of academics were carried out. The dismissals were implemented without trial, and those affected had no choice to appeal. Formally, these and other repressive measures were aimed at Gülen's so-called terrorist network. But in practice, they affected all opposition to President Erdogan's Justice and Development Party, that is, the ruling party in Turkey. Since the start of 2016, More than 1,200 Turkish university staff and students have been detained, and more than 8,000 university staff have been dismissed. And attacks on the autonomy of universities have strengthened state control over higher education and research. In 2017, my research colleagues and I interviewed Turkish social scientists who have signed the peace petition. Half of them dismissed, and the rest living in fear they might be. Our focus on social scientists is not coincidental. Attacks on academic freedom have taken in members of all research disciplines, but sociologists, political scientists, and other social scientists have been particular targets, as their research questions are often politically controversial. Turkish academics under the threat of dismissal emphasize the difficulty of conducting research, with diminishing opportunities for international exchange and in obtaining grants for projects deemed politically sensitive. More significant still, they described an evolving academic culture characterized by self-censorship in writing. When planning their research, many researchers felt forced to reformulate their research questions. One of our respondents explained that many people started to change the titles that they had chosen and the descriptions of what they really meant in the text, censoring themselves. End of quotation. Self-censorship also characterized the interactions with students and with colleagues. One respondent said some students had taken to monitoring and informing on teachers. And I quote, "A student asks a question during a lecture. You answer it, but the question turns into a trap for the teacher. And as a result, teachers have started being more careful about what they say." Dismissals often have drastic consequences for scholarship. Not only are the dismissed academics prevented from conducting research as university-based scholars, but out of fear that the regime will interfere with their activities, Turkish scholarly publishers and journals are reluctant to publish manuscripts submitted by dismissed researchers. The dismissed academics are socially in a very precarious position. As well as losing their position, dismissed researchers face a lifetime ban on all civil service employment. They also struggle to find work in the private sector due to what seems to be a systematic system of exclusion. It is also difficult for dismissed scholars to start small private businesses. One of our respondents, for example, told us about 4 dismissed academics who opened a meatball shop, but had to close it in face of daily fines and harassment by the municipal government. An interesting and paradoxical observation in our interview study with dismissed researchers and with researchers living in fear of being dismissed was the stark contrast between the two groups. While the mood among researchers living with the threat of dismissal was characterized by a sense of resignation and lack of motivation, the mood among dismissed researchers was characterized by a defiant sense of newly found freedom, of no longer needing to avoid sensitive issues. That is, despite the efforts from the regime didn't manage to silence the discharged scholars. One researcher told us that she was actually glad to have lost her job. And I quote, "The campus has such a tense atmosphere. It was psychologically difficult to teach. It was torture to work in that environment, end of quotation. An especially intriguing development is the rise of alternative underground academies. Alternatives to formal institutions of higher education are not a historically unique phenomenon. Underground universities have repeatedly been an integral part of the struggle for democracy and for national and religious freedom. For example, in Kosovo, in Iran, and in the Palestine territories. Poland has had a particularly long and rich history of alternative academic organizations, reflecting the nation's turbulent modern history. The first alternative university in Poland was initiated in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries in the eastern part of Poland, previously under Russian control, as a tool to promote democratic mass education and, in particular, the education of women. And during World War II and the German occupation, alternative universities were an essential part of the Polish underground resistance. The tradition of underground universities was revived under the repressive communist regime in the late 1970s. This alternative university in Poland was not an isolated achievement. Rather, it was an integral part of an evolving, wider, self-organizing civil society against Soviet domination and a repressive state. By the end of 2016, a number of dismissed academics established the Street Academy in Ankara, the capital of Turkey, as an alternative way of reaching out to students as well as the general public. In a show of defiance, they organized outdoor lectures, for example, in parks and in streets. As has been the case with earlier underground academies, the Ankara Street Academy sought to preserve and enhance a thriving democratic civil society, strengthening the ties between academia and the street. Even though the Street Academy was initially a success, it now wrestles with a number of challenges. Activities depend on the volunteer services of a small group of activists, and the underground university wrestles with many security concerns. In spite of these difficulties, however, the broader social significance of the Street Academy is clear. It has become an integral part of an evolving, wider, self-organized civil society against a repressive state, as was the case of the underground university in Poland under Soviet rule in the 1970s. The future of academic freedom in Turkey is uncertain. Some of the dismissed scholars we interviewed saw migration as their only option. Others hope to eventually return to their careers. As said earlier, academic freedom depends on a plural, democratic society. And the future of academic freedom in Turkey will be closely linked to that of the increasingly authoritarian Turkish regime. However, one thing must be clear. The violation of academic freedom in Turkey deserves serious attention from the international scholarly community and from students all over the world. Thank you.